everyone, and welcome to my channel. So, today I am going to be drawing and painting the flowers that you can see in my thumbnail at the beginning of in my thumbnail. So, I am just getting the picture up on my screen as we speak so I can do my own version of it. So, I'm going to start with a pencil drawing. And I'm just going to rough in. I'm going to keep the same composition. I quite like how these flowers are placed in the picture. So I got this reference off Unsplash, which is a royalty-free reference site. So I'll draw the bulby bit, the middle of the flower first. That gives me a reference for the length of the petals. So the petals are 1.5 times the width of the buddy bit in the middle. And that's pretty much how I gauge all my measurements of everything. I measure everything against, I'm considering that the base of the drawing, and I build everything around that. And then I just rough in the petals as they foreshorten coming towards us. It's an optical illusion. They're all the same length-ish, but they look shorter coming towards us because they're in the foreground. Maybe not that short, but yeah. I'll adjust and readjust as I think I need to. And they sort of overlap here and there. There's a couple together up there. That one goes off behind. That one goes over the top there. I've decided against foreshortening just because until I might adjust it again later, but we'll see how we go. So just get all of these. There's lots of flowers, lots of petals overlapped. They sort of go sideways there from here. And they're a little bit sideways there. And then just the stem coming down. I'm going to change that one. I don't like that one. Whoops. So, again, it's 1 and a bit. Alright, I'll just square off that edge a little. Alright, that's one flower sort of in. And then there's another one right next to it. Right next to it, sitting about there. And I'll draw its bud in the middle. It's about the same size, but it's more side on. And it'll disappear off the side of the paper, which is fine, because I've drawn my flower a bit big. So they're basically just big oval shapes, a circle and ovals. So it's not complicated at all. And the fun part comes with the shading and textures of the buddy bit in the middle. So again, 1.5, 1 and a bit times bigger. That bud's bent there. There's a petal facing us there with a couple of longer ones underneath. That one's like that, and then there's one underneath. All right. So that's a couple of buds, a couple of petals, a couple of flowers, and then this one up here. There's another little one down here that I will pop in. And it's not going to be exactly like the reference because I'm using my own impression as well, like my own version of. It's fun to change things a little bit. So I've just made it slightly larger, but the composition is basically the same. The flowers are in the same spots, just I've made it quite large. Come around here. Okay, and then there's flowers in behind. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to move that one slightly to the left, like that. Pop that bud like that. Then that goes out. Oops, I don't want to do it up that high. Where's my eraser? Got to have that a little bit more flat, so I'm going to move that a fraction, erase it a little bit, maybe come back to the middle a fraction, about there, move it back in a bit, like that, and then I'm going to make those petals come out. Like that. Because they all go out that way. like that. All right, and then same on, I've got to erase that other line. It looks a bit too hard. I need it to be solid, softer, not so solid, I mean. It needs to be a bit more biggly bendy, like that. That's a bit better. And then there's one in behind, which was going to be in shadow, and you can only just see the edge of it. And I'm not going to focus on the greenery. I'm just going to focus on the flowery parts. I'll do a solid dark background, I think. So that can go like that. Then, oh, actually, there is some leaves down the bottom at the front that I will have to do. This one is more or less opening, so it's not quite open, but it's starting to open, so its petals are more uppity, more pointing up. And it's fun to do them in their different shapes, like do them, you know, so that some are opening, some are open, fully open, a couple are dying, you know, the couple are wilting. It's always fun to do. I've actually got 2 pictures that I've got for a future reference, that one is wilting. I've got a full flower one and one wilting, and it's quite lovely actually. So I'll do a little one in the background just to create a little bit more symmetry there. I'll make it smaller. Come down and down there, and I'll give it little petals that are more uppity, not open yet. Just starting to think about growing and opening like that. And then leaves. I don't like that bud I've got there. I've done the bud's too deep. The buds don't, they go like that. They're much more squat looking like that. That's better. All right, I think we're good. Pop in a couple of leaves like that, and I'll just do the background mainly dark, so these leaves will be not the focus. There's a leaf coming off there, down and around there, and I'll just darken up the rest, I think. All right, I'm quite happy with that. So now I'm going to grab a bit of cloth. Where's my cloth? There's my cloth. I'm going to have a sip of my coffee. I'm going to start with watercolour first. I might do the flowers. I was thinking about doing the stems, but I might do the flowers first. So, and you can see I've got my palette there. You can just see that on the edge. So I'm going to pop just plain old lemon yellow. Oh, why is my brush dirty? All right, I clean my brush. Make sure the palette's clean as well. Make sure the brush is clean. Then grab some lemon yellow. Start again. There we go, that's a bit better. It's got a little bit of green in it, but that's not going to hurt anyone. And I'll do it very diluted. And I'm going to start at the top and work my way down. Because if you start at the bottom and work your way up, you end up with your hands in it. I've found that a few times, that I've ended up with my hand in my paint and I've smudged it, which doesn't matter. You can clean it up, but it's a job you shouldn't have to do if you shouldn't have to and you don't want to. So yeah, this is the base layer. I'll do several layers of yellow to build up shadows, lights, darks, all that fun stuff. I can actually go onto the buds, and these are very simple shapes. I can go onto the buds and I can go over the top of those with green a little bit as well, eventually. The ones at the back are more orangey, but again, base of yellow, because that'll be the highlight colour coming through. So come around there like that, onto the bud. And you can see I'm using that sort of rounded side of my brush to lay on the paint. Very diluted lemon yellow. I can go onto the centre. The centre's orange, but I can go onto the centre just to have that as a base colour also. So I'm just roughing it in. Just roughing it in. I might do a dark background. I tend to stick with my dark backgrounds. I quite like them for the contrast. Just a bit of pure lemon yellow up there. Get lots of water. I could do a nice indigo. That would be gorgeous, actually. I love indigo. Pop that in the background. All right. And yeah, get that all based in. Fill in that blob in the middle. Like that. Come down here. And it's very simple. Very easy. Okay. Now I've got the leaves down here. I can actually, you know what I can do? I can actually colour the leaves in yellow as well, because you'll see little highlights and reflections of the leaves coming through and the stems. All right, there we go. There we go. Like that. All right, I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to start with my stronger yellow. So I'm going to go a bit of cadmium yellow. I can pop that on the same mix-a-doodah thingy, what's it, me same well. But I'm going to dilute it. So it's watered down, and I'll start to build up. I should have started on the top flower, going up to the top flower. All right. And it's darker underneath. So the underneath of these petals is darker because it's the shadows. So wet my brush, clean it, take the excess moisture out, and I'm just going to drag that orange that or cadmium yellow that I've just plopped on there, and I'm going to drag that around with a damp, clean brush. Like that. Under there. And the same process on these, just underneath. I'm going to leave little snippets of the lighter yellow. Clean my brush. Take the excess moisture off and drag that yellow around. And do that process for every flower, every petal. This is really quite a strong orangey colour, but I've actually changed the flower on this a little bit. This one's quite a solid dark yellow orangey colour, but I'll just fill it in lightly for now. And I'll leave the centres for last, because the centres have got quite a lot of detail. They've got quite beautiful. I'm just going to wash this over that. Make sure that these ones are a bit stronger. Leave a bit more of the tips of them are lighter, so I'll leave the original yellow on the tips. Like that. I can blob in that centre because it is quite dark. Clean my brush, drag that around. I'm not filling, you see, I'm not filling in the whole petal. I'm darkening up the centre where the middle is. Grab a bit more cadmium yellow onto my palette. Fill that bit in there. I can add a little bit stronger colours, more reddy orange towards the end in the darker areas. Fill that in. All right, looking okay. I'm just going to drag out those edges. I don't want those lines to be quite so harsh. Okay, happy with that. I might work on the green bits a bit. So I'm going to go to my maybe chromium oxide green. We'll go that for the beginning because they're quite, and I can add a bit of the yellow to it. just to soften it a bit. So I'll do that. I'll pick up a bit of yellow out of that top pan. I just yellow it off a little bit, and then I can come in and just create the green going down the stems, keeping it nice and simple. And I'll clean my brush, excess moisture off, and drag that around so I don't have hard lines, because I don't want hard lines. Again, go onto this one, and there'll be shadows and things. Like I'm just at the blocking in stage at the second, just getting all the basic colours where I want them. Come down that stem. It doesn't have green in the middle of that flower, so I have to come down to here, go onto this one, this bud and stem. I'm just blocking it in, take it around like that. And I'm using my Sennelier and Schminky watercolours today because they're my faves. I might bring that stem right down, because there are stems in the background that you can sort of, when I do the background, I'm going to soften that right up. I'll come down here and create it as a hazy effect, I think. Can I see the bud on that one? I can just see the bud on that one, and these are leaves. So I'm going to quickly, carefully do the, oh, I need to get some more of my chromium green. Get some more chromium green, stick a bit of my cadmium yellow with it. Little dip of cadmium yellow. Less water, more pigment on the brush to get a darker underside on that leaf. Wet my brush, clean it, wet it, clean it, take the excess moisture out and drag that edge around like that. This leaf is darker in the middle, but I can do the, you got to work with watercolors, you work light to dark, so you can be pale in the first few layers and just add darker as you get sort of more into it. Come down and around here, fill that one in, because I'm going to make them a nice soft background. It's not going to be, come up and around here and add a few sort of greeny, petally, leafy bits and just fill in a few extra areas just for a bit of fun, because why not? It creates a bit of contrast as well. So I'll just do that. I'm going to put a blue background as well, because I want to, because I love blue. And I think that'll be a nice mixture with these colours. So I'm just, you can see I'm just doing sort of loose, sort of oval with points to create more leaf. I didn't draw them in, I'm just painting them in. So I'll draw, while that's still wet, I can just darken up the undersides with the same colour. It's still chromium green, just less water, more pigment. Add the darker shadowy bits, which is not darker, it's just the same pigment, just slightly different ratio of water. Round. And I am much more of an animal artist, so this is fun to do something different. It's fun to practice all subjects. I do a bit of everything, but my specialising is animals. But I do like to try different things. So I've been focusing a lot more on florals, just to better my art, better myself, get a better grasp of different mediums and how to look at things differently. Like that. Come around here. All right. Come into there. Okay, I'm going to get some pure chromium oxide, and I'm going to just take that around the edges of my buds and anywhere that's in shadow, anywhere that's darker. that, and down behind that flower. All right, starting to come together. Starting to come together. Okay, the focus is not on the leaves, but I will add some detail to them at the end. All right, now I'm going to get into some oranges. So I'm going to go in to my Sennelier red orange, and I'm going to add some yellow to it, some cadmium yellow, which is an orangey yellow, just to soften it a fraction, just to make it not quite so vibrant. And I'm going to start adding darker orangey tones to little bits of the flowers. And again, clean my brush, take the excess moisture off and drag it out. So that's a little bit of pigment, a little bit of water. Just looking at this one, that petal's all dark, like that. But then the ones coming to this side are not as dark at the top. So I take that down like that. Get my damp brush, drag it out so I don't get hard lines, because I don't want hard lines. There we go. Very simple. Darken up. Now this one is actually quite a dark, because it's in the background, it is quite a solid orange. So pop that in, and it is just a matter of being patient and layering. And I've got that I can use gouache on this as well, and I may use gouache towards the end. I'm not decided yet. If I need it, I will. Like I usually add gouache for highlights and things. Okay, so now we're going to get into this one. Actually, no, we're not. We're going to do this one down here. We're going to get the darker bits in. I've got to get some more moisture on that brush, some more water into my mix as well. Damp that off a bit. Down and around here. Wet that. That one's actually orangey on the tips. And then coming around here, that one's quite orange. And I'm going to drag that around with my brush. So clean my brush, wet it, take the excess moisture off, and then drag those lines around. And that'll move that paint just enough to soften those edges. So now onto this one. I can darken up the middle, and I might use gouache for the detail in the centres of the flowers. So this one is darker underneath. Darker in there, and I'll also add some strong colours, because contrast is great fun. Contrast is lots of fun. Come in here. I'll take that petal up around the outside of that one. There we go. Clean my brush. Drag that around. So that's just a damp brush. All right. And I do love daisies. I love all kinds of daisies. My garden's filled with them. Absolutely filled with them. I think I've got about 30 daisy flowers that are about 6 feet tall. And they're about 30 years old too. Planted them for my wedding 26 years ago, and they're still going strong. They long-lived, great drought tolerant, because we have lots of drought here. Don't get a lot of rain. So they're very practical Australian plant that can survive in all kinds of climate. I'm going to wet that bud. I can pop some yellows back into that. I'm going to add also some detail onto the petals towards the end. So just at the moment, I'm just building up the layers, getting a bit of depth to them so they don't look flat, like they're just all looking at us. So fill that in, clean my brush, excess moisture off, and drag that round. And just soften those edges. That gives you that gradient while the paper's still a little bit damp. That's one of the tricks to it too, is to do it while the paper's a little bit damp. All right, so now I am going to use, what am I going to use? I'm going to use a bit of Cenelia orange, I think. I'm going to go down here. It's a very red orange. It's a very, very, very red orange. And I'm actually going to add a little bit of blue because I want to create shadows. I'm ready to start with the shadows around the buds. So that makes, you can see an orangey purpley, browny purpley colour, which is a good shadow colour for around these sort of little buddy bits. I'll add a few different tones of these. So I'm just going to start, pop some dark down. So I've got the beginnings of where I want my darks to be. Like that. Just adding little blobs, and you can see that's still wet because it's flowing. The little dots around, they're sort of flowing a little bit, which is good, which is what I want. It's drier down there, so the dots look a bit like a harder dot, a clearer dot. And I'm just doing the one side of the flower. You can only just see a little bit in there, and just see a little bit in there. That's all. Right. And I'm going to go in with more pure orange. Just go a cadmium orange and add almost pure pigment. So it's basically the same colour, but less water. And it gives you a stronger version of the same colour. And I take that into all the dots. Hello, Sleestack! Leave this on. Thank you, mate. Thank you. Much appreciated, Dale. So I just pop on all the little dotty bits. And I'll add layers of different tones as I go eventually. Right. Now, I'm also going to use this orange into the centre of these flowers, the petals. Because each time you put it on, it gets a little bit stronger and a little bit darker. Don't stick it on every single petal because it'll look too lumpy, just like chunky. I want it to still look soft when it's done. Now that one in the background is quite solid, but I'm only going to do the underside of the petals, the darkest, strongest orange. Like that. There we go. I can do the darkest orange, the strongest orange right at the base of the petals there. Thank you, mate. Come down and around here. Fill in these. All right, get the shadowy bits under there. Like that. I really like that shadow colour that I've made there. I really like that. Don't know where I'm going to use it, but I'll find somewhere else to use it, I'm sure. And there's a lot more little buddy details coming onto these flowers, but I'll use my... Actually, I might add the background. I might let that dry a little bit. Clean my palette. Clean my brush. Make sure it's clean. Get it into my clear water. I've got 2 doodahs of water here. And I'm going to grab my indigo, because I love indigo. And I'm going to have an indigo background on these. So I'm going to dilute it a lot. So you can't really see that, but I'll clean that top palette so you can see it up here. I'll clean this one and I'll pop my indigo up there so you can see what I'm going to be using for the background. And I'm going to carefully paint that around. Whoops, a daisy. Get that off there. Like that. Just lift that up because I got it onto my petal. I didn't want it on my petal. Paint in and around the edges of these flowers. And that'll help to bring out the contrast also. And I can usually do this wet onto wet, so I'd wet the paper and then drop the paint in, but I'm doing it wet pigment on dry paper because I have a little bit more control over this piece. Just a little bit more control. Come around there. And I'll do that a couple of layers also, just to add a couple of tonal differences closer to the flowers. So this is a little bit fiddly, but and I work sort of in reverse. Lots of people work, they do the background first. I don't know why, but I don't. I never have, really. I tend to do my backgrounds middle to last, once I've sort of got my structure of my work where I want it. I don't think there's any hard set rules on what's right, what's not. You can just do what feels right. If it turns out how you like it in the end, well, there's nothing lost. It's not a problem. Come down here. And I sometimes do a softer background where I don't do right to the edges, but I am going to go right to the edges with this one, I think. And complete the paper, like fill in the whole paper, which I don't normally do. I usually leave a little bit. But I'm going to go to the edges today because I want to see how it turns out. We'll see. We shall see. We shall see. So that's actually a bit watery. So I'm going to add a little bit more pigment. Where's my indigo gone? There. A little bit more pigment. A little bit less water. Whoops. Still water, but less water. All right. Whoops, no, that's probably too much. That's not enough water. Got to find that balance of, there we go, that's better. So that still runs, but it's slightly more of a dark tone. And any excess, you just take the moisture out of your brush and your brush will suck that paint back up again. And I'm using silver black velvet watercolor brushes. I love them. I use them a lot on my smaller pieces. For the big pieces, I use Raphael watercolor. They hold a bucket of water. They hold so much water. You can do a meter, washes of a meter, and it just holds that much water. So you can wet a meter's piece of paper quite easily. Very wet. So yeah, so for big pieces I use those. For smaller pieces, I use my silver black velvets because they're more intricate and they're a bit of a firmer brush. They hold the moisture, but I love a mop for big pieces. They're actually called a mop brush, the other ones that I use. So I'm just going to come into these tighter areas and fill them in like that, coming around that leaf. Doesn't matter if it goes a little bit where I don't want it. I can always tidy it up. I'm going to end up with sort of lines here and there that I'm going to have to go over, but that's fine. I'm moving a bit too slow, you see. I need to move a bit faster because where I'm joining the background, the one part's drying before I get the other part on. So, but it's actually quite a hot day here too because we're in summer. So my paper's drying incredibly fast, which is great because it's convenient. It means I can get my piece done faster. But yeah, if you're trying to time it, not so good. Okay, come down here. Fill in around these petals. So I love this indigo. This is my schminky indigo. It's my favourite indigo. I get that around all of my petals. It's just the most beautiful blue. And I can tidy up any bits that I've gone onto the petals. I can just lift that off with my bit of cloth. Just touch it with a bit of dry cloth and that'll absorb back up onto the paper. Onto the cloth off the paper, you know what I mean. Come around here. Fill in here. This is very time. This is time consuming, but it's quite relaxing. Like this is the part that my favorite thing to do is to draw, and I love detail. So I love drawing lizards and drawing every scale. I'm a bit of a glutton for punishment. So this is actually really therapeutic. They're really relaxing to do these kind of cutting backgrounds, and it's very calming. Especially when you've got a crazy busy mind like me. This is like meditation. doing the backgrounds. So just filling in behind. Because you've got to be careful. You've got to concentrate enough, but it's not rocket science, so you can relax a little bit. But you know, this gives you that just right amount of focus that you can calm. And I'm liking that against the blue. I'm liking those oranges against this blue. So I'm just going to cut in a bit closer. And I have to say, I do use this blue a lot. Indigo is one of my most used colours. Indigos and burnt umber. Because I do a lot of wildlife and there's a lot of burnt umber. And indigo is nearly always my go-to shadow colour. So get some more indigo on my palette. Get a bit more water on there. Whoops, not that much. I need a bit more water than that. That's way too solid, way too dark. So I've got to quickly add some more water before it dries and spread that out. There we go. And I will do multiple layers closer to the flowers just to create a bit of variation in the blue. So it probably won't hurt. This is one area that I probably will do a fraction darker because it is to the middle of the composition. Just got to keep moving around these top bits because those edges will dry and I'll end up with hard lines. And I don't really want to do that, so carefully cut in around this daisy. Come in around there, in there. There we go. Getting there. And to this point, I haven't used gouache yet. I will. I'm pretty sure I will on the details, on the actual liney bits and these bits, the stameny bits in the middle. All right, I'm not sure of the technical terms because I enjoy gardening, but I don't know all the scientific names for things. All right. And I don't mind leaving little blobs, little bits of blue. Clear paper. I don't mind that. You know, that's part of watercolor. It's part of the beauty of watercolor. At the end, that you have little bits that sparkles, little sparkles. Watercolor is magical like that. And it does leave little sparkles of bright, happy paper. Pop a bit of blue in there. Come around here. Now that paper is pretty much dry already. So anything I do over the top of this, I'm going to have to re-wet the paper a little bit. Righto. There we go. That's pretty much blocked in. And it creates just that, and I quite like the little bits of, the little highlighty bits. So I'm going to leave those. I'm not going to fuss with those. I'm going to add now a little bit less water. And I'm going to go over just a couple of the areas towards the middle of the painting. I want that to be a couple of tones darker in the middle at the back. So I'm just going to carefully use the tip of my brush. What is the difference between watercolor and gouache? Watercolor, hello Ariane, anyway, hello. Watercolor is translucent, transparent, you can see through it. You can see the previous layer underneath. Gouache, if you don't add a lot of water, is opaque. So you can water gouache down so that you can see through it, but it is a much stronger pigment and it, when used with less water, is opaque. So you can use it like acrylic. You can paint reverse. You know, with watercolor, you have to work light to dark. With gouache, you can start dark and work back to light. You can treat it more like acrylic. But it is re-wettable. You've got to be so careful with it because you touch it with water, it will re-wet and you'll smudge it easily. It can dry to quite a powdery finish depending on the quality of gouache you get. Mine, I've got Sennelier and Schminky gouache, so it doesn't go powdery, but it can dry chalky. It's more of a matte finish. It doesn't have a gloss finish. It's a matte finish. Lots of the classical artists used to use it. If you Google gouache, famous gouache artists, you'll be interested to see who used gouache for their, like, for when they were planning out a painting, they'd do it in gouache, and then they'd do it in oil. But the gouache would be their warm-up piece to get things where they want it, and then they go back and recreate it in oil. But yeah, it's a more forgiving medium than watercolor. So I'm just wetting my brush and dragging that edge around. It is more forgiving. You can fix up mistakes a lot more easily. You can go over errors and cover them. I'm going to use gouache for the finer detail. All right, come down here. So I don't want this all over the whole piece. I just want it into the background in the middle and maybe a little bit to the edges, just to feather that out to create just a softer effect. I like to do this with backgrounds. It just gives them a little bit of something, a little bit of variation. And just clean my brush, take the excess moisture out of it and drag that edge, just to get rid of those hard lines that I don't want. Like that. I can darken up under there. Like that, come around here. Right, I quite like that. I quite like that. Just having a quick look at the big screen because I can get more of a gauge on how it's looking. I think I'm happy. I'll pop a little bit of the darker tone into the middles, like that. Oops, I need to come around that one a bit more. Like that. Bit in there. There we go, I think. That looks okay. Clean my brush, take the excess moisture out, drag those lines up there. Don't want that hard line. Same there. Just move it around a little bit. All right. So now I'm actually going to go to my gouache, which I've already prepared and re-wet. And I'm going to go straight in to, I haven't wet my orange. I need to wet my orange. Wet the orange. And I'm going to go in with a bit. I need to actually redo my wash palette. I've had this palette set up for years, like literally 3 or 4 years, with the same gouache in it, and it's stayed all right. It's re-wet really well up until today. We've just had a hot year, so it's not wetting very well at the moment. So now I'm just going to start adding with the gouache the finer lines that you can see on the petals, and I'm using French vermilion and yellow and lemon yellow. French vermilion, lemon yellow to make an orange. And I'm just going to pop in a few petal lines, not solid all the way and not all the same length, because variation is fun. But yeah, and the quality of gouache really does vary. You get with gouache, you get the best you can possibly afford, because it does make a difference. It is, you do get what you pay for with gouache. And I highly recommend Sennelier or Schminke. They're a beautiful gouache. They're beautiful pigments. Highly recommend them. Highly. I have used a couple of other different brands that have long since been retired to my shelf and will never come out again because they're very chalky and not friendly to use. And I'm also doing, and you can use gouache on different color, where watercolor you're pretty well tied to paper. With gouache, I have a friend who is doing gouache on wood at the moment, and it's fascinating. So it's more versatile as well. I'm going to darken up. I'm not going to do this everywhere. I'm going to add a bit of that Venetian red. Where are you, Venetian red? Or French vermilion, rather. I'm going to get a little bit more yellow. You can't really see that. There we go. It's up here at top right. So this is the gouache. You can see how much more solid it is as a pigment. And I could go over the top of anything on this. And I'm also going to add that. Actually, I'm going to go that into the dots to really make them pop out a bit more in the middle of these daisies, like that. And I can also go a bit of pen if I wanted to later, because I love my ink pens. I've got just going to add a bit of that darker red under there. I've got Pitt pens, and they're Indian ink, and they're really beautiful with watercolor as well, I have to say. I do that quite a lot too. I'll use a little bit of my Pitt pen to strengthen detail and colour. So I'm just going to add a bit of that. You see I've worked for the palest yellow back through to almost a red. All right. And I can also, because there's really dark little stameny bits in there, so I'm going to go a purple, and I'm going to go over the top of that, and I'm going to add a bit of blue in there as well. So a bit of magenta, a bit of blue. This is gouache, just over the top of that other colour I've already made. And I'm going to bring that in down the bottom into the shadowy bits, like that. Onto a couple of these. So that's a beautiful shadow colour. But not all the way around, just the bottoms at the centre. But you can dilute it, and it becomes very watercolour-like. I'm going to go under there. All right. Onto that one. Onto this one at the top at the back, just a little bit around the middle. Right. Okay. And I'm going to go in with a pure purple without adding anything else. Oops, no, I need to get a little bit more water on my brush, because those little, they do have little poppy-uppy stameny things. Like that. I'm going to add those around the little seedy bits. Not everywhere, just in a few little spots. I'm going to go the green. Now I'm going to go back to my watercolour now, just for this bit. I've got to add a bit of a stronger green. I'm going to go a bit of olive, touch of olive in with my other green. And I'm going to clean my brush, make sure it's clean. Wet the petals, or the leaves, sorry. Wet the leaves, only where I want the paint to go. And drop that in, that stronger watercolour. And just let it flow around a little bit, just to create a bit more interest there. Whoops, like that. It helps if you wet the paper. It does help it to flow, and the watercolour will only flow where you've put the water, so it won't go beyond the water you've put down. What happened when you mix transparent colour and gouache? I can show you on another piece of paper. Hang on. I do it. I do it. I will add. It'll make watercolour go opaque. So it will. If you add white to, I'll show you here. So I'll get yellow. Actually no, I won't. I'll get red. I'll get a red like this. So that's red gouache. Oh, no, it's not. That's red watercolour. Sorry. And I'll add a bit of red gouache. I should have done that on the palette. Hang on, I'll do the same thing, but I'll do it on the palette. Red gouache, red watercolour. It'll just make it opaque. There we go. See, it just makes it a much more... I'll take that off and I'll go the just pure red. So that's red watercolour mixed with gouache, and that's the same red watercolour. You can see how you can see through it, and you can just see through that. So if you add yeah, if you added an opaque colour to it, it'll just it'll make it solid. It won't be as transparent. And if you add whites, it'll help you lighten things. Like it'll make the reds go pink. I'll add a bit of white to this actually, just to bring back a couple of lights. Just little dots of light here and there on the very tips. Because yeah, usually with watercolour, white is your paper. But a lot of people will use gouache or a touch of acrylic to bring back their whites that they've lost. And I'm a believer in that. If it works, I use it. If I need it, I do it. But yeah, it'll make it opaque. It'll just make it opaque. I'm just adding that onto the top. Not everywhere, just in a few spots. Anywhere I can see little highlighty bits. Like that. Thanks for the lesson. Oh, no worries, Dale. No worries. I'm happy to answer questions. Happy to answer questions. And I love gouache. I do love gouache. I've done some still lifes. I like to do, I don't use it so much for animals. I use it a lot for still lifes, like flowers, pots, things like that. See, I've made that too pale. So I'm going to go back over. I can go over that with a bit of cadmium gouache, just to go back over that white bit. Just made that one a little bit too pale. There we go. Just add. There we go. That's better. That's betterer. Okay, I'm just having a quick look at my picture. And I'm going to add some stronger green. So I'm going to go onto my gouache and grab some olive green gouache, which is just this. It's pretty much the same as my watercolor colour, just opaque. It's the only difference. It's opaque. And I'm going to take that onto the bottom, and that'll just create a non-see-through dark closer to the base of the leaf. And it just gives you a stronger contrast, a bit more fun, a bit more vibrant. Just take that here, there and everywhere, a little bit around. So it's more abstract, like it's not photographic by any means. I'm a little bit more abstract with it. I'll darken up down under here. I'll just draw in some lines like that, just to give the leaves some definition. Like that. Come down onto there. But I can treat it the same way, pretty much. Like I can wet my brush, take the excess moisture out and drag the gouache out just the same. Doesn't quite spread the same, but it gives you a very similar effect. A very similar effect. There we go. And I reckon I am going to take the edges off and I'm going to call that done. So I'm going to sign it down here. Bottom left, or bottom right, sorry. I've lost my lefts and my rights. That's a fun, simple little watercolour and gouache piece. Take the edges off and you get beautiful crisp lines. So I love doing that. Like that. And that is a very simple, very lovely watercolour picture that you could give away as a Christmas card. Hello, Sassy! I did! I hope you did too, Dale. How was your Christmas? I had a lovely, relaxing one. We actually went to the lake and sat and looked at the water for a day. I had Christmas Day at home with my children, which was absolutely heaven. But yeah, so had a wonderful day and I hope you did too. So there we go. A very simple but really effective picture, watercolour and gouache flowers. So thank you for watching. Have an awesome day. I'll probably be back tomorrow with another video. No idea what I'm going to do. I'll figure that out. Don't worry. idea. But yeah, Merry Christmas, Sassy and Ariane and Slee Stack, everyone who's been here. I hope you all had a wonderful, amazing, blessed day with family and love. Boring as ever. Oh, boring's good. Boring's peaceful. Boring means quiet and calm. Boring is healthy. Boring is good. We'll just stick with boring. I'm good at boring. Anyway, much love to you all. I will be back tomorrow. Thank you. It was a good fun one, a good fun simple one. So have an awesome day and I'll be